In addition to the carpet bombing of civilians in Laos and Cambodia, America has been the architect which helped empower a host of brutal dictators and genocides around the world. East Timor, Pinochet, Bangladesh, Angola, the continuation of South African apartheid, General Videla, and Uruguay. The US is an actual living comic book villain who dedicated his life to making life much worse for those who were already destitute around the world. Indonesia is one of the largest countries, highest populated, strategically located, and at the center of key trade routes and organizations such as G20 and ASEAN. It has several issues that will continue to trouble it in the foreseeable future and prevent it from becoming anything other than a regional power. Let's explore why Indonesia is a poor country even with a good GDP and how America played a part in it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. First of all, it is a nation of small islands, thousands and thousands of them. On the islands are a multitude of different ethnic and cultural groups. Traditionally, it has been very hard for them to keep the country from imploding, and they have only managed to do so until recently by using brute military force. Being a nation of islands also make it hard to build up national infrastructures in order to bring economic growth to a new level. The caveat here is that more than half of the Indonesian population live on the island of Java, and that has helped Indonesia focus its economic development. But the economic development of other islands has largely been forgotten due to the lack of proper infrastructure. Talking about the island of Java, having such a large population on a tiny island is both a blessing and a curse. It allows for Indonesia to thoroughly take advantage of road and rail networks on the islands to develop its economy. At the same time, Java is also the most densely populated island in the world, and it lies on an active seismic zone. There's 127 active volcanoes in Indonesia, and most cities are on the coast. There is a real possibility that there will be a major eruption in Indonesia within this century. As Japan has learned, being the victim of seismic activities can have a real impact on GDP growth. Having such a large population also requires a lot of agricultural goods to feed them. Indonesia is blessed with extremely fertile lands due to volcanic deposits within the country, but those are not the kind of stuff you want to bet your future on. Also, a lot of the fertile land in Indonesia are used to grow cash crops rather than food crops. While this is sound economically, it does affect food security within the country. They also have some internal cohesion issues. Java, Sumatra, Borneo, Sulawesi, Halmahera, Lombok, and Sumbawa are all major Muslim. Seram, Ambon, Flores, Sumba, Timur, and the rest of the Moluccas are Christian. Bali is a Hindu enclave. The transmigration program was not only contentious, but led to many local conflicts. Despite being ended in 2015, public disunity coupled with climate change can have drastic effects on the economy. Due to being a tropical island nation, they are particularly susceptible to climate change and foreign naval powers. You see this weakness highlighted over and over through history. The Portuguese and Spanish, the Dutch, Americans, and Japanese were all able to conquer the disparate islands of the archipelago. But on the flip side, the local powers that have done well were also naval-focused. Notable entities include Sriwijaya, Majapahit, Demak, Gawatalo, Bali, Ternate, Tidore, and Ambon. As China's power grows in Asia, other countries have been forming defensive coalitions to balance it out. Recent examples include Japan's new military and economic cooperation with Vietnam, closer Japanese cooperation with the Philippines, upgraded ties between Vietnam and India, and so on. Many of these countries are looking to the US as a source of protection, which is why Vietnam recently upgraded its relationship with Washington, why India's Prime Minister deepened military cooperation earlier this year, and why the Philippines is allowing America to build 4 new military bases on its territory. But one of these partnerships appeared to fly under the radar, getting very little news coverage and attention. the US and Indonesia announced a comprehensive strategic partnership. This entails a variety of initiatives, economic investments, cooperation on issues like climate, health, and terrorism, and so on. It also includes military cooperation. Although China is never mentioned, its presence clearly looms large in the agreement, which talks about countering cybersecurity threats from state and non-state actors, improving Indonesia's maritime domain awareness. This agreement comes on the heels of years of increasing military ties and joint exercises. At the root of Indonesia's concern is the fact that China claims pretty much all of the South China Sea as its territory. Among China's claims are the waters near Indonesia's Natuna Islands. In 2021, China demanded that Indonesia stop drilling for oil and gas in those waters. Indonesia rejected China's claim, and the two had a long standoff in the region. Indonesia's leaders know that without US aid, they'll be vulnerable to much more bullying. But Indonesia's strategic importance to the US goes beyond its economic potential. It lies among critical trade routes between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Around 40% of China's goods trade passes through the South China Sea. This trade has to pass through one of three Indonesian straits, Malacca, Sunda, and Lombok, or else go the long way around Australia. If a major conflict does break out between China and the US, the waters and islands around Indonesia could be the location of much of the fighting, as they were in World War II. On top of that, Indonesia's success would promote the kind of values the US wants to encourage in the region. Along with the Philippines, it's Southeast Asia's freest and most democratic country, having successfully made the transition to democracy after decades of military dictatorship. Since the fall of Suharto in 1998, relations between the United States have not been as good as they were during the Cold War, or even during the 1990s, when Suharto was still in power. The first reason has to do with terrorist attacks in Indonesia on Western targets, and the US policies and actions during the war on terror. The second reason, US investment and trade with Indonesia have declined relative to those of other countries, particularly China. However, Chinese economic influence will unlikely match the levels of Japanese or US influence in Indonesia in the 1970s. The last reason is the US arms embargo placed on the Indonesian military from 1999 to 2005 as a result of Indonesia's chaotic pullout of East Timor during its democratic transition. This is the reason why Indonesia bought Russian Suhois and MiGs in the early 2000s. It is also the reason why the bulk of new fighter jets it purchases were Rafale from France, with a smaller purchase of F-15. Indonesia can't just buy all US fighter planes like Singapore. The EU, despite Portugal being very active in promoting East Timorese independence, didn't impose an arms embargo. Indonesia does matter geopolitically, but a bit distant from flashpoints. To their north, they have the Eastern influence, and to the south, Western influence. They are prospering, being a platform where these two forces collide. However, they do need to tread carefully. Neighboring states like Malaysia, Singapore, Papua New Guinea are also in this game, in competition with each other. So far, what we see from the G20, they are treading carefully, and it seems like they have a good decade ahead of them. Domestically, they need quite a bit of reforms to let go of some of their backwardness to unlock their economic potential. Comment down below on what you think, and if you like this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing.